Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of Community and Health Services Committee to order. Welcome to those that are here. We have a full agenda, I think. 3 important items: employment services pilot program, the plant and chronic homelessness, and the Herbs Road shelter and evaluation and recommendations. I'd like to begin by inviting Julie Hale, committee clerk, to conduct the roll call.
Regional Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig.
Present.
Councillor Deutschmann. Chair Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Hunick.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett.
Present.
Councillor McCabe. Present. Councillor Nowak. Councillor Salonen.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Burbanovich. Councillor Williams. Councillor Wolf.
Present.
And I see that Councillor Deutschmann has joined us. Thank you.
As we begin this meeting, we are again reminded that many of our homes and places of employment in Waterloo region are situated on the land that is the traditional territory, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Shunnitan peoples. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to Waterloo region, and we also recognize the contribution Indigenous peoples have made in shaping and strengthening this community. We are grateful for the opportunity to live and work here and reaffirm our collective commitment to keep the promise and challenge of truth and reconciliation real and intentional in our region. Could I have a mover and a second that we reconvene into open session? Moved by Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Shantz. Could you please use your e-scribe buttons to indicate your support? That is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, we have no presentations. We have 2 delegations today. Both are present. And for those who are joining us in person and are going to be delegates, you can proceed to the podium when I invite you to come. For those, some instructions. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting: interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder to delegations: please don't take any offense if following your presentations there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. And a quick reminder to members of our audience, you're asked to maintain order, and that means that you not address the committee without the permission of the chair, interrupt anyone, or disrupt the meeting with unreasonable noise or vocal expression such as applause, booing, or cheering, and displaying signs of posters. So, our first delegation listed is Joe Mancini from the Working Center, who is here in person. You want to make your way to the podium, Joe, and you have 5 minutes. I don't think it. Yeah,
I'm
okay.
sorry. Jay Strauss, who's the manager of, or coordinator of the Herbs Road shelter. We don't want to say very much. What we want to say is thank you for making the recommendation to support ongoing of furthering the shelter, the Herbs Road shelter. We think it's a really important project. We know 19 people have been housed since the shelter opened. We know presently 46 of 50 people who are at the shelter are considered chronic. That means they've been homeless for 6 years or longer. the shelter has really demonstrated the need for a place that takes people who have been so long in their encampment, in some kind of encampment, and then provide a place of relationship, of support, of walking with on their journey. And nothing is more important than an individual who's been in a campsite, who's been in tenting, living in the conditions, living in survival, both with their mental health and addiction issues, but also finding food every day, and then coming to the Herbs Road shelter and being offered a door, a cabin, a steel door that locks, that they can lock, that they know is their place. And boy, we've just seen the difference that it makes in people to have that opportunity. And that's on the region for having built that space and made it possible for people. So we're just really thankful for that opportunity that it's been made. The Working Center has enjoyed operating it. It's such a good place. And I just want to say one other thing, in that in August, where'd it go? In August, we provided 1,500 supports for people. So that meant 110 medical appointments and connections, 113 housing supports, so the housing workers working with people on their housing stuff. That's like going to apartments or getting them housing ready. 37 income support meetings, 540 hygiene and clothing supports, 552 transportation assistance, meaning getting people, if people use our shuttle, it's to get to an appointment, to get somewhere. They have to, it's not taking anyone anywhere, it's for a reason to help them move along. There's 39 legal and court support situations, 100 belonging supports, and 17 dental appointments. 1,500 different kinds of supports. And so, what a difference. That's an encampment. We said the region said they were making a different kind of an encampment. And this is an encampment that helps people, and it's really worked. And so thank you very much, and we really hope that you will vote positively on your recommendation. And Jay is here if you do have any questions as well.
Yeah, there are a couple questions, so I just invite you to stay there. And just for clarification, you said chronic homelessness 6 years. I think you meant 6 months.
My list said 6 years. That comes directly from Stephanie.
Okay.
That means that the individuals, the individuals have very long connections to the system.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Councillor Hunanek.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Joe and Jay, for delegating today. I want to just pass along some positive feedback that I received from a constituent who lives in close proximity to the Herbs Road shelter. They were very fond of the model and thought that it met many needs, and also they were impressed by staff's work. Since the inception of the shelter, they've only encountered one negative incident, and from their perspective, staff dealt with that quickly and in the best way possible. So thank you for the work that you do, and know that in many respects, it is having a positive impact.
Thank you. I think that's really important for us to respond quickly to neighbors. And Jay and his team we really do that. These are hard situations, but there's always a response.
Thank you, Chair Erb. Joe and Jay, thank you so much for coming. I often make the declaration that I am no expert in homelessness, but I know I'm looking at some people who are. And the region absolutely, although we're the service manager, could not do the work that we do in the community without trusted partners like you. you've kind of answered the question, but one of the things that we've been doing is apprising representatives at other levels of government what the plan to end chronic homelessness looks like. And two of the questions that they've asked, and because you're the experts and I'm not, I think I'm going to pose them to you. So I believe homelessness will be solved one person at a time because they're all very unique and they have a set of circumstances that need to be spoken to. But they've asked, where is the return on investment? And Joe, I think some of the stats that you were bringing forward are very, very key to saying this is changing people's lives and saving systems money. And the other is, how do we involve other parts of the community other than, in addition to the people who have earned or lived experience? And I know you talked about reaching out to the community, and I wonder if you could just comment on both of those things. I mean, some of what the stats that you're talking about are actually statistics, I think, that keep other money from being spent and other systems from being taxed. But I'm just wondering how you would respond if somebody posed those questions to you, as I am.
For example, the work on the legal work, I'm quite familiar with it because we've been doing a lot of it lately. Individuals who are because of addictions end up going into the court system, that's a tremendous cost. And so what would that be? Like, I don't know, $100,000 for someone for 6 months or something, or maybe way more, maybe that's on a monthly basis. What we're trying to do is help those individuals not get caught in that system, and that the legal system itself is pushing people into jail. And so we don't want our people going to jail. So, and so then it's also true about health care. And we have an agreement with community health caring. So we have a nurse practitioner and medical staff on site
3 days a week.
3 days a week. So this is really, this is what saves our system. I really do think it's what you say, and we feel that's what we do.
Yeah. But as far as the return on investment, when you think that 20% of the people that we have served in the 2 years that or year and a half that we've been operating, have moved on into permanent housing, whether that was supported housing or just a market rent type opportunity or subsidized. These are people that wouldn't have been engaging with system workers to help find those supports and move along. That, I think, is truly one of the greatest measurements of success of this program and return on investment. Because ultimately, this is not designed to be somebody's home. This is a transitional point for people to move on into the next steps.
Again, thank you so much for what you do every day, all day, and for that parting comment, because I think that's really the focus on everything that we're doing. So thank you very much.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair Erb. And thank you, just echo other people's comments about, thank you for the work that you and your staff teams are doing at this location. Just wondered about, in your professional opinion, the size of it. Is 50 people sort of the optimal size to work with, or did you have just interested in your opinion around, your professional opinion around, whether that's the right size, whether it could be larger, or if we had another site, if it were smaller?
I'm going to say first, though, that compared to King Street with 100 people, and even more so in King Street where people are beside each other, there aren't any doors. It's such a different experience for our workers and for the people who are in these sites. It is a better experience at Herb Street, and 50 for us has worked really well. It seems like the right number. And I think more would not be as good, but Jay.
Yeah, I mean, we could do more people there, but not given the space constraints. And with the deep mental health concerns that we're faced with, I think much more than 50 would start to become a little bit unmanageable. A second site, absolutely. But as far as more people at that location, I would probably say that we should probably stick with what we have.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Erb. Thanks for coming and presenting. My question is not so much about Erb's Road, but I know we're going to have a number of conversations today around housing, and so I'd like to understand the difference between some of our housing options and shelter options. So Erb's Road is one, and you operate that. You're also building on Victoria Street. Can you tell me the difference between those two and how they do serve the same or different clientele, shall I say?
Wow, that's a great question. The difference on Victoria Street is that there is a longer-term stay on the part. There is an expectation of a longer-term stay on the part of an individual. So of the 44 units, it is under, 97 Victoria will operate in between being a shelter and long-term housing. Some of the individuals will not, we will think they should just stay. It's a good place for them to be, and it will keep them solid. But there will be other people who will want to move on, and we've seen it, and into different kinds of either social housing or other kind of housing. So I think having different levels in any kind of situation is good. In our case, at 97 Victoria, it is very much designed, for example, to take people directly out of the encampment that's right across the street. It will be designed for that. But at the same time, we hope that people will move on to other housing so we can bring more people in, but some people will end up staying longer. I think that's how.
Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Chair. My question, thank you, by the way, for your delegation. My question has to do with the 20% success rate. Do you see any way to increase that to 30 or 50%? And how would you do that, and what would the timelines be?
So we're talking about a larger societal issue at that point. When opportunities do present themselves, we move on them. But there are very few opportunities for people with limited income in order to make that next step. So yes, I would love to have it be 90%, but unfortunately, we don't have affordable housing, and in the cases of some individuals, supportive housing, in order to take everybody.
So I understand from your response that you don't think that there's anything you can do in your work that you're doing currently. It's outside influences that would increase that only. Just a question, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's we are doing our end of the work and making sure people are ready to move on, making sure that they are paper ready. 40 of the 50 individuals that we currently have at the shelter are offer ready. They are ready to make that next step. All the paperwork's in line. They're ready to go. It's just finding those opportunities for places that they can afford or that are suitable.
Thank you. Yeah, that's answered my question. Thank you so much.
Of those offer ready, I think it is true that some of those would still need supportive housing, and others would need regular privatized housing. So sometimes the supportive housing obviously has to be built.
Thanks, Joe and Jay. Those are all the questions. Our next delegate is David Alton, representing the Social Development Center of Waterloo Region. Welcome, David. You have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, committee and chair. I'm here to speak from the social development perspective in favor of the staff report and in favor of Herbs Road continuing to be provide the number of beds it provides and continuing to be a stable support for folks. In June, we conducted a third-party review of Herbs Road as part of our lived expertise prototyping process, which is within the Plan to End Chronic Homelessness. We worked with a group of lived experts to co-design an engagement that ended up interviewing 35 current and former residents of Herbs Road. Together, our analysis with the staff survey and working center's observations have informed the staff report in front of you. We are very grateful to the region and to the working center for giving us access to Herbs Road and to hear directly from residents. We hope this can act as a prototype for further transformation across the system. The first thing of note when we started the review is that we received a very strong, resounding rejection of our initial review question, which was whether or not Herbs Road should close. Lived experts and Herbs Road residents did not want to even consider reducing the number of housing options in the region. And so I want to bring an emphatic yes to extending the lease agreement at Herbs Road. A similar sentiment arose across the engagements we held later this summer for the Frederick Street renovations that are happening at the former Mary's Place location. Unsheltered community members and advocates are deeply concerned by what seems to be a trend of reducing beds. Mary's Place has closed. The Schwaben Club is closing because of changes with the former childcare centers. It looks like Edith Mack and the Kinsman site are also closing. And today there's a chance that Herbs Road could be closed as well. Several residents of Herbs Road are deeply concerned of what the outcome of today means for them. They said things like this: "It feels like I will be on the street again when the lease is up. Please give us advance notice when the region knows. It is going to be hard to have a backup plan. There are no tent cities allowed. The bylaw destroyed everything. Please keep it open, just more lenient. What happens when this project ends? I'm going back to Cambridge. What about my friends? We'll end up back on the streets. What was the point of all of this? Don't want to see people fall harder and lose what they have worked on. There is no way we are all getting housing before the lease is up. What are you going to do with us? I am scared that they are going to close down." The conversation lived experts and residents want to have is how to improve Herbs Road and make sure that all shelters are humane and adequately resourced. We receive so much qualitative data and quotes on the dynamic lives of residents. We are excited to continue working with regional staff and the Working Center to build on this transformative energy, and a summary report should be released later this fall on the impact of these parties coming together. Herbs Road is a complex place. We receive stories across the gamut. Many residents and lived experts have strong criticisms and are calling for changes, especially system changes. But despite the loss and harms that some residents have experienced at Herbs Road, this location has been a lifeline for many, and to close it or disrupt its operations would put people in a dangerous position. Multiple residents talked about how they would not have survived without it. It was a godsend. If Nicole didn't come, I would have overdosed if I had to do another winter. I wasn't planning on surviving another winter. It's exhausting surviving rather than living. And you can not underlay the hope that Herbs Road has brought people. It saved my life. Everything has been pretty good. It did deliver on its promises for me. It feels more human. I think about the future. I have goals now. It is nice to have goals again. I kick ass with my addiction now. I almost don't remember what it feels like to be addicted. I'm on my way to getting housing. I can see my kids. My ex believes I'm trying to change my life. I am blessed. It's given me a sense of hope. I've seen lots of people get housing. I've grown independently. I didn't have a voice until recently due to an abusive partner. I want positive change in this world. I can finally say my book ended and I'm starting the first chapter on a new book. It is not another year wasted for me. When we were doing this review, we ran into so many people who we knew from encampments who are now at Herbs Road. The region and the municipalities cannot evict encampments at Victoria Park, 150 Main, Soper Park, and elsewhere to send people to Herbs Road, and then later evict them back onto the streets because of land leasing issues. As has been demonstrated in the legal cases at 100 Victoria and Branston Road, evictions are a violation of the right to life. I would argue that shelter closures should be considered in a similar light with the same level of severity. There is a lot on the line for the residents of Herbs Road in your decision. Please proceed holding their voices in your heart. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, David. If you want to remain there, please, there's a couple questions. Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair Erb. Thank you, David, for coming today. And I especially like your angle on how do we improve or build on a model like Herbs Road. And so I know for folks with lived expertise, there are some who think that Herbs Road is really far out there. And so I'm wondering if you've heard from those folks with lived expertise, is there a more ideal location in their view, geographically speaking?
So I will say this, that the residents of Herbs Road and the lived experts we worked with are very aware of the nuances and the barriers that the region is facing when it's trying to find locations within the region. And that also that there is a diversity of opinions within the residents and lived experts. There are people who are looking for a place that does feel more removed from society, that does feel more peaceful in the countryside. But and so those people, this location is really, really working for. But there are lots of people who do really struggle with the location because of its separation from the services in the city, and are definitely advocating for shelter options closer to downtown. I would say the way that they are talking about it is that what they want is just more options. They recognize that this site is working for some of their friends and neighbors, and they recognize that more is needed, and especially for those who need more services, something closer to downtown service areas is definitely desired.
Thank you for that balanced perspective. It's very helpful.
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you, and thank you very much, David, for coming. I just wanted to clarify, I know that you were talking about it being a land lease issue. It's actually an Ontario building code issue with the sewage, so I just wanted to clarify that point. I mean, the end question is still very similar, but wanted to clarify that that's the problem.
Thank you for that clarification.
Not a problem. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you for delegating.
Thank you.
There are no other delegations that we are aware of. So we will move on to item number 7, the consent agenda. Are there any items that you wish removed from the consent agenda? If not, I would ask for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Use your e-scribe buttons to indicate your support. That is carried. Thank you. Agenda item 8.1, strategy priority, homes for all. The Employment Services Pilot Program. I'll call on Commissioner Sweeney to introduce staff to report on this, and this report is for information purposes only. However, we will take questions. Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you, Chair Erb. You might recall about a year and 3 or 4 months ago, we came forward to Regional Council with an update on the employment services transformation that was underway across Ontario, and how we felt it was potentially going to impact the work we're doing in an employment space. We had put forward a recommendation for Council to allow us to run a pilot project that would be complementary to the other employment work that we were going to do, and we asked for the ability to run that employment pilot project until March of 2025. As you'll see in the report later on in Plan and Budget, there will be an opportunity for Council to consider the potential financial impact and decision around extending that. But as a follow-up to that initial report and commitment to Council to come back and give you an update on how that pilot project is working, we're here today. My colleague Christine Stahl, who's the author of the report in your package, is here to walk you through at a high level some of the findings and the good news story that we have for you today. And then again, any questions around financially supporting this going forward is meant to be referred to Plan and Budget. Christine, it's all yours.
Good afternoon, Council. In 2023, we came to you to request your support to continue to provide employment services through the province's employment services transformation, a transformation we felt would require additional effort and funding on our part to ensure we continue to deliver results and impacts. At that time, we strongly believed that the benefits of remaining an employment provider while also being an Ontario Works administrator. Our rationale was very simple. We have the best understanding of the challenges faced by Ontario Works participants, and we wanted to ensure that their voices were heard in this new employment program model. And with the provincial government's continued policy statements that Ontario Works is intended to be an employment program, we remain committed to this view. That was just over a year ago, and today we're here to update you on how things have progressed since we launched the pilot project that is referenced in our report. In January, we transitioned to the new employment model. This model brought with it new expectations, targets, and technology. Everything and all the challenges that you would expect with a major provincial shift. Importantly, your support allowed us to maintain a seat at the table. Through this, we've been able to advocate for our Ontario Works participants at ministry levels, discussions, and across our catchment area, ensuring that their needs are understood and represented. To date, we've been successful within this new framework. We've adapted quickly to the new expectations and outcomes, regularly exceeding provincial targets. However, provincial programs and targets do not perfectly align to meeting community and local economic needs. Therefore, we have been proactive in identifying service gaps and have only been able to do it with the extra capacity afforded to us by Council through the approved project. One major gap we identified early on was the lack of access to targeted training supports. Those short-term training programs that directly link people, particularly those from equity-deserving groups, to available jobs within Waterloo Region. To address this, we started asking ourselves, how do we bring these opportunities to our region, and how do we ensure that our participants have access to them? We sourced additional funding from other areas and developed partnerships with local industry and employers to bridge this gap. Had we not maintained our role as an employment provider, we wouldn't have had a platform for which to develop these opportunities. But because we remained in the role, we've developed vital partnerships, including one with Grand Valley Construction Association. This partnership specifically focused on pairing individuals from underrepresented groups with technical training and job placements in construction. Now, let's be clear. Employment programs like these have existed in various forms over the years and will continue, and we hope that will continue into the future. But none of this would happen unless people are committed to seeing these programs come to life. It requires a lot of time and effort to secure funding, meet ministry expectations, and most importantly, to make a real impact on the lives of the people who participate. Service providers are still operating under the 2018 funding models and are therefore under-resourced. This limits their ability to move beyond their primary mandate and deliver innovative programming. The current funding model is a barrier to bringing training and employment pathways to our region, the effects of which should not be underestimated and which are most impactful on equity-deserving groups. This is our why. We're proud to say that our Grand Valley Construction Association project has already produced remarkable results. Out of the first 19 participants, 16 have secured full-time employment. And that's what we're here to talk about today, why this matters. Why do we as public servants care so deeply about helping people find jobs? It's because living on Ontario Works is not sustainable. $733 a month is not a livable income. That's only 27% of the poverty line. Our participants are living in deep poverty, and our motivation is to help them move out of that situation as quickly as possible. Take Tim and Kadir, for example. They were part of the first cohort of the GVCA program. Both were new to Canada, living in shelter situations. Through this program, they not only found full-time employment, but were also able to secure stable housing. Tim and Kadir are now self-sufficient, and by transitioning out of shelter, they've opened up spaces for the others in need. This is the kind of impact that we're talking about, real transformational change. These stories illustrate the importance of maintaining employment programs and building relationships with employers and industries in our area. Another example is the Community Benefits Program. This initiative embeds employment requirements for equity-deserving groups into capital projects. While the pilot is still in process, we've already had 3 individuals from these groups hired as a result. One of these individuals, Manuel, was a skilled newcomer who was unable to find work in the trades for 8 months, despite labor market shortages, implying systematic barriers and highlighting the need for programs such as this. Now, while the provincial program still has gaps, particularly regarding being truly client-centered or supporting equity-deserving groups, we believe that our continued participation is essential. It gives us the opportunity to actively influence the employment landscape and ensure that the changes we advocate for have a lasting positive impact on our community. To this end, we're actively pursuing additional sources of revenue for our pilot project, with the goal of having a levy-neutral program for 2026 and beyond, something that Council will be provided the opportunity to review and consider as part of the plan and budget process over the coming weeks and months. We are so proud of the progress that we've made, and with your support, we will continue to create opportunities that truly transform lives. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. We have a couple councillors who have some questions. First, Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you very much, Christine, for the report and for your presentation. I was just curious, because of the great success of the Grand Valley Construction Association partnership, that funding, is there potential for ministry renewal, or is that kind of a big question mark? I'm just curious what may happen to it in the future.
That is it is provincial funding for that program, and we are pretty confident because it has been such a successful program that it will be continued for the 2025-2026 year.
Great, thank you very much.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair. Christine, thank you so much for coming in. I first heard about this program not through anybody at the region, but actually through Grand Valley Construction, and it was Jeff McIntyre that was absolutely so enthusiastic. One of the things that I love about this, not only is it equity seeking and deserving groups and it's people on Ontario Works, but it's also in non-traditional jobs. And I think it was held out, the Premier came to talk about this program, and it's held out as a best practice. So I just really want to commend all of you for doing a lot of this off the side of your desk and making such an amazing difference to the individuals who are participating. And I know that Grand Valley Construction are very keenly thinking that you'll be able to find funding to go forward. So congratulations on a wonderful way of sort of bridging a gap that existed for people who were existing on the margins instead of earning a living. Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christine, for presenting and for the good news report. This is for information purposes only. Thank you. The next agenda item is 8.1.2, the plan to end chronic homelessness. The report following that is on the herbs extension of the herbs hybrid shelter, and sort of ask council's indulgence. Some of the questions may overlap between both of these reports to try and keep us focused. I'll try and navigate as well as I can, but ask for council's indulgence as well as we try to focus on the individual reports. So, Mr. Sweeney, if you want to introduce this on the plan, and then I think Ryan is going to be presenting as well.
Thank you, Chair Erb. Yeah, I'm going to just turn it over to Ryan, and again, thank and acknowledge your ongoing support, encouragement, and good questions throughout the development of what has become a significant piece of aspirational and policy-driven work, really rooted in the experience of the people who live on a daily basis, as David, our delegate today, referenced today. So I'm happy to turn the floor over to Ryan to walk you through a quick, short presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Mr. Pettinger.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Chair Erb. So yes, it's good to be in front of you again today, Regional Council, on this latest milestone of our plan to end chronic homelessness. The presentation will highlight a little bit about where we've been, where we're at as of today, and where we hope to go next. Next slide. Thank you. As you'll likely recall, the plan to end chronic homelessness was approved by Council in April of this year, alongside an expansion in the budget to support that work of $10.2 million. And I'll talk a little bit more about that significant investment in my next slide. But also back in April, that approval came with the direction to report back in October of this year with the ongoing funding strategy and the engagement plan, which you'll see forms the bulk of the report that's in front of you for consideration today. So what have we been up to over the last 6 months or so since the plan was approved? Well, a fair bit, actually. That significant investment of $10.2 million has had a deep and immediate impact on our community. I'm not going to read all of the bullets that are on this slide to you, but I will summarize to say that budget expansion has been fully allocated for 2024 and has increased both our housing outcomes and stabilized a system that was at a crisis point. The investment has made an immediate and demonstrable difference. All of the work leading up to the plan, to the engagement and the funding strategies in front of you today continues to be done with intentional, meaningful collaboration with equity-owed groups and co-creation with community partnerships. This work hasn't been perfect. It is not yet all-encompassing or not yet fully representative, but we continue to grow and evolve and learn from the process and remain committed to improving, particularly as we embark on the community leadership model in 2025. Could you go to the next slide, Rhea? Thanks. Thanks. A couple of data slides to work through with you as well. There's a fair bit to unpack in this particular graph, and I'll do my best to walk you through it. What you're looking at here is a scenario demonstrated where there is no additional investment in the plan to end chronic homelessness from any source. If we were to just continue the work with the funding that is available to the system as of today, with some small cost of living and inflationary increases, that's the scenario that's represented by the bars that you see from left to right. Going back to 2018 actuals through to 2024 actuals, and then from 2025 to 2030, showing that projection in funding overall from all sources. The bottom line on the graph then represents housing outcomes, again, using 28 actuals to model forward from 2025 based on historical achievements. And then the top line. You'll notice this represents our forecast of chronic homelessness, again, based on a scenario of no new investment and the exponential growth of when those bottom line housing outcomes are not able to keep pace with the growth of chronic homelessness. Essentially, what happens is that the gap between those who enter into chronic homelessness and our system's ability to solve the problem grows, and it grows at both an accelerating and an alarming rate if we're not able to keep pace with that projected growth. Next slide, please. So from that grim scenario to a sunnier outlook, this graph illustrates a scenario where all of the funding is available and secured to do the work outlined in the plan, again, from all sources. Again, this is based on historic actuals going back to 2018 and modeled forward from 2025 based on historic achievements. Again, you'll see the funding on the bars and the funding increases from the previous slide. What this graph then demonstrates is that while chronic homelessness continues to exist, it stabilizes and then begins to decline. But what really accelerates is the bottom line in terms of the housing outcomes that we're able to achieve. What this tells us is that homelessness will continue to be something that this community faces as far as we can currently project into 2030, but the instances of it will be rarer, more brief, and less likely to reoccur. Essentially, the gap between those experiences of homelessness and our ability as a system to resolve it compresses significantly. And that creates the state that's projected in 2025 that you've heard referred to as functional zero. Next slide, please. Moving off the funding strategy and looking closer at the companion piece of the report to the engagement side of the strategy. The overarching goal of the engagement strategy is to unify community, business, and government voices while clearly detailing the collective investment needed in the action items. It has been and will continue to be essential that voices from across the community are heard in this process, and that the plan is one that has broad and deep support and commitment across sectors and perspectives. The engagement plan outlines detailed communications and engagement objectives and includes creating a suite of supportive materials, a universal set of educational documents, presentations, and a digital toolkit to advance awareness and conversations with community, business, and government partners. And on the level of government side of this work, I can update that over the past couple of months, we have engaged, presented, and started this dialogue with every single MP and MPP across the region. Those conversations are alive and well and will continue. Next slide. Final slide, and bringing us back to the recommendations that are attached to today's report. What staff are seeking is endorsement today on prioritization and engagement. The direction to staff and community to focus on the right work while unifying to accomplish that through the detailed and collective investment required. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Mr. Pettier. Question from Councillor Hunick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that report and for the comprehensive plan to implement the plan. I noticed in the report that there is even suggestion that there could be a social media campaign. And so I'm just wondering if you could fill out a little bit more why a social media campaign would be needed or beneficial.
So thank you and for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll start and might look for some help from my communications colleagues as well. Part of what we know that we need to do is a bit of an education about the situation that we are in, that we face as a community, and the circumstances that lead someone to maybe be in a situation of homelessness. We know that the work of implementing the plan to end chronic homelessness is not something that we as the region can do alone. It's not something we can do just in partnership with our existing community agencies. It needs to be much broader in terms of an all of community, all of government response. And part of that is education and awareness. And part of doing that work could be accomplished through a social media campaign. Connie, is there anything you'd like to add to that one?
No, I think that was great, Ryan.
I see. Okay, thanks. I just want to underscore how much I appreciate the comprehensive nature of the plan being put forward and the way that you've communicated it. So thanks very much.
Councillor Schatz.
Thank you. Thank you for the, excuse me, the presentation. I think right now we have about 600 shelter beds. Is that roughly? I just looked at the end of September report and it came maybe just under that. My question is related to how we spend, how we manage the resources and how we work towards ending chronic homelessness. And we heard today from Herbs Road from Mr. Mancini that possibly 80% of the folks that are there would be ready to move on to other housing if there was other housing available. I know of three major projects that I think are starting to fill some of that void. House of Friendship, the new working center, and is it Mary's Place, the one in downtown Kitchener, I think. How is that working into this? And if, for example, the 80%, even if 50% was the number, we'd only need 300 emergency shelter beds. So how are we working to get those other beds there so we don't need to keep doing emergency shelter beds?
Mr. Pereira?
Yep. Thank you for the question, Councillor Shantz. Great question. And right now, it's a matter of us working very hard on both fronts. Ideally, and what the plan ultimately calls for is a shift of resources from emergency response into permanent housing solutions. Right now, the number of resources is more focused on the emergency side. We're continuing to invest in the supportive and affordable housing side, and ultimately want to get to a place and environment where the resources that we are putting into the emergency side can be shifted more fully to the housing side. We're not there yet in 2024. A large part of the plan and the projected funding and modeling that I showed you is dependent on continued investment on supportive and affordable housing. You named a few projects that are in the works right now. There are several more, including our Waterloo Regional Housing redevelopment plans as well, that will also form a significant component of that work. We need to move away from emergency response. We're struggling to keep up with that pace while we continue to invest at this point in time. We ultimately know and understand that there will always be a need for an emergency response and an emergency safety net to have people enter into, to stabilize, but ultimately the bulk of the resources should be focused on resolving the issue. We're not there yet, but it is what the plan calls for and what the plan models, both in terms of the outcomes and the financial dollars that are required to make that a reality.
Councillor Deutschmann.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. Are we planning an updated pit count as part of our information?
Thank you, Councillor Deutschmann. Yes, we are. We are currently planning an updated point in time count October 22nd this year. So that'll be another data input and another source for our modeling that will impact the numbers that I've shared with you today. And that will also be shared back to Council to help paint a more accurate picture of both where we are today, and so that we can use that to update the projections that I also shared.
Thank you. I was wondering, with the potential closure of the CTS, how has that impacted our plan to end chronic homelessness? Have you considered that?
Certainly, and I'll look to my colleague, Dr. Wong, to jump in if I need some support on this one. So, Councillor Deutschmann, thank you for that. Clearly the decisions that are being recommended and ultimately being made by the provincial government with respect to the hard hubs and the CTS sites will have an impact on the people that we serve. And we will need to continue to work in collaboration with our colleagues in public health. We will need to work very closely with who we expect and hope will be the successful applicants for the new hard hub, partners in this, and the broader community and those that are experiencing it on a day-to-day basis. In terms of the impact, I think we may see a scenario where provincial or federal policy decisions may impact the inflow into chronic homelessness and the severity of mental health and addictions that we're seeing. But we are concerned with the direction, and we're concerned with to ensure that people have the supports that they need. But in terms of it being directly related to the work that needs to happen in the plan to end chronic homelessness, those prioritizations and the work that needs to happen regardless of some of those other policy decisions.
Thank you.
Do you want to add anything to that, Dr. Wong?
No, thank you.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you. I was curious on Appendix A, page 5, when it's talking about estimated costs for 2025 for the All Community Leadership Table and the Lived Experience Working Group, that we're looking at $1.8 million for those two. Can you further elaborate on that ask?
Councillor Salinan, while Ryan's looking it up, can you repeat the two that you're asking about again for me as well?
Yeah, it's both sections under the Community Voices and Partnership. It's actually up on the screen as well. Both of them are an ask of $900,000, and I just want to understand what that is.
Yeah, so what I would, I mean, Ryan could probably speak to it at a high level. I don't have the specific sort of line item details. But what I can tell you is both of these are foundational elements of the work. We do acknowledge that the All of Community Leadership table is a fundamental sort of prerequisite to getting this work done appropriately. And the Lived Experience Working Group is actually to support the work that David, our delegate, and others are undertaking to ensure that the work is informed that way. What I can do is commit to when we come back to plan and budget, because today's not about the specific funding, is to ensure that we have specifics aligned to the service expansion that we could potentially put forward. Ryan, if you've got any specific details in those line items that you can share, then that would be great. But if not, we can bring that back to plan and budget. Councillor Salinan, if that would be okay?
Yep, that's fine. And then I did have a second.
I think Mr. Pettier do you have part of a response to that? Some more detail?
Yeah, I can provide a bit more detail,
Okay,
Mr.
ahead.
Chair. And to your question, Councillor, those are dollars that are dedicated to keep those groups going for the next 5 years. There's consultant fees in there. There's staffing and other resources that allow those groups to continue to operate over a 5-year period. I can drill down more through the plan and budget process, specifically on the cost items associated, as Mr. Sweeney alluded to, though, in the future.
Okay. Second question?
Yes, thank you. And yes, I would love to see a more detailed breakdown at budget time. And then I'm just curious, and I know Councillor Shantz has asked kind of the same question that I'm wondering, but looking then on page 6, when it's looking at the investments that we're putting into emergency shelter, transitional and supportive housing, and then it does also have debt servicing. I guess I'm also, like Councillor Shantz, struggling with at what point do we actually switch to being housing first? And at what point are we not accepting the shelter system as actually serving everyone, but instead stop investing in a broken system and go to a system that actually impacts for the masses, not for the few, positive change on those experiencing homelessness?
Certainly, I'll take that, and building off the question from Councillor Shantz as well. As Ryan alluded to, both in language and also in the graph, there is a coming together of a one-to-one when we achieve functional zero, where we have the ability to provide a housing outcome for everybody that experiences chronic homelessness, and we are not there. The gap is real. And Housing First is again rooted in the idea and the philosophy and the pragmatic approach where possible that everybody experiencing chronic homelessness be provided with a permanent housing option and with wraparound supports. Housing First is also not, in our experience, a one-size-fits-all, and it's not a one-size-fits-all across communities in Canada that are Housing First communities, of which Waterloo Region is, one of the first, in fact. Councillor Salinan, I think the essence of what we are all trying to achieve here is exactly the outcome that I think that you're describing, which is a shift of resource allocation to support people in housing and for and with the supports that they need. We also have a scenario that we currently do not have the requisite number of permanent housing allocations in this communities, which is why the answer that Ryan gave to Councillor Shantz is we're doing both is really the root of the plan to end chronic homelessness. The investment that is required to support people who are currently experiencing. In some cases, we have 50 people that the response that we can provide to them is the provision of a cabin with a roof over their heads with the supports that they needed and a key to lock up and feel safe and secure. But it's not, as Jay mentioned, it's not permanent housing, and we recognize that. The current stock of affordable and transitional and supportive housing does not equate and equal the number of people experiencing chronic homelessness. So there has to be some level of investment to provide the acute needs that or supports that people need while we're also building out with partners the requisite number of affordable and transitional housing. Ryan mentioned the Waterloo Regional Housing Stock. Hundreds of millions of dollars to build and equip out 2,500 new units. A new shelter care model at House of Friendship, a new supportive housing at House of Friendship, a new supportive housing at the Working Centre. Our partners in Indwell around the corner from this location, all adding net new supportive and affordable housing stock. The alternative is we would have to wait for all of that to come online and expect that all of the people who would be waiting outside, falling further and deeper into chronic homelessness, and likely for a significant portion of them, not being alive to see the end result. So that from our perspective, the plan to end chronic homelessness is rooted in addressing the acute situation that's right in front of us while building for the future.
Okay. Councillor Leggett.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. First off, my one question is, I keep seeing all of community leadership table, and I'm not sure who that is, if it says a forthcoming one. Is that a new one coming out of this? And if so, who's all on that?
We don't know yet. So that is a recognition that a table, for the word that we're continuing to use, a group of folks who can help oversee the plan to end chronic homelessness that come from across the community is really needed so that we're not continuing to operate in silos or making decisions that have unintended consequences. And so we're actually having this conversation with the co-creators now about what that looks like, how do we figure out who should be on it, and when do we implement. And that's work that's, we hope to have that up and running in 2025.
Okay, I was hoping you'd say that because I keep hearing that everything is those with lived experience, and that's about those unintended consequences. So thank you for that. My next one has to do with the supportive housing units. So in the 2024 budget, we supported 44 net new supportive housing as of page 27 of the agenda here. And then when I look at page 35, it talks about expanding the supports for 6 fixed site supportive housing. Now we have Indwell, who's trying to build in our community, and I've sent out a request to know if they have applied for regional housing. I'm not getting a response on that. But if they have, are we waiting for this all to be passed before we give them funding? Because I've noticed that the region has provided funding for them in other cities in the region. So if you could answer that, and then I'll get on to my last little bit.
Councillor Leggett, I'm going to pass this one over to Ryan.
Sure.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So any future project that's going to be net new, so if there's a project in construction right now or under consideration right now, funding would be dependent on budget approval through 2025. Other projects that we have awarded have been on previous allocations or funding that becomes available. We're aware of the Indwell project in the city of Cambridge. We have had conversations with that leadership group, have discussed potential future funding opportunities, but any funding at this point in time that would be awarded to that project or any other one would be subject to budget approval in 2025. I think that's the best way I can answer that question right now, but if I haven't got it right, please let me know.
No, I would appreciate that one, but does that, so they haven't put in an actual application yet with the city. They've done all of the other proof of work, so did they have to put in the application with the city first and then apply for regional funding, or do they apply for the regional funding so that they can go forward with their application? Do you know?
Back through you, Mr. Chair. I'm not aware of any formal funding application for that particular project coming our way. I certainly know that we have connected and let them know about potential opportunities that are coming. And in my opinion, it wouldn't necessarily it wouldn't have to go region first or city first. It's something that we'd get and something that we could talk with the city about as well. I don't think there's a cart or a horse in this particular instance.
Okay, so my final one to do with supportive housing is, and it follows up, I think, with Mayor Craig's question to do with housing, supportive housing for seniors previous. I note that we have the social housing for seniors at Robert Kerr Manor, but now we have been, well, the region has been moving high acuity people in there, which displaces those seniors. Is that happening right across the region, that the seniors are being displaced in these buildings?
Mr. Pettier.
So short answer to the question is no. There's no sort of plan for overall senior displacement anywhere. I know that we did have to use some available space at some of our buildings to resolve instances of homelessness that were pretty pressing for us. I'd consider that a one-off situation in the particular building that you are referencing. We are seeing older adults in greater frequency accessing our emergency shelter system or sleeping unsheltered. So that particular older adult population in terms of experience of homelessness is one that we are aware of, is one that we know to be growing. You also asked the question about who's been involved in the plan to date. And Mr. Sweeney gave the example of how the Olive Community Table is growing, but currently participating in our co-creators group, our group of 57 different agencies, and seniors are well represented at that table. So we're certainly hearing from that specific group around the urgency of seniors and their need for affordable housing as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, can I have one more follow-up question, please?
Okay, related to the report?
Yes, it's related to the response that they just gave to the report.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So if you're saying that for the senior supportive housing, or even the manor, that's a one-off, does that mean that those buildings where that's happened, that's going to go right back to being for older people, or is it always going to continue to be supportive housing? Because that's under Indwell now currently, correct? So is that going to remain that way, or is that going to revert back to what it was?
Go ahead.
Yep. So right now, the way that we have that set up and support of Indwell, that's going to continue as we have it today. We haven't made any further decisions about the future demographic that will be there. Right now, it's a mixed population, and we see that continue for this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Still going with first-time questioners, Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all the commentary, and especially what kind of comes to the surface for me is the fact that we don't have solid information on a lot of issues in terms of ending chronic homelessness. So I question, first of all, brought up the issue about dry shelters. And we don't really talk about addiction levels in shelters, although we know it exists. I guess my question is, why don't we get more into that so we have a better understanding of just the problems that staff are facing, that the community is facing in a sense also. And I think it's important that we do have that understanding, going around from shelter to shelter and talking to different people. I have an anecdotal understanding, but I just would be interested in the thoughts of staff on that.
Through you, Chair. Councillor Craig, thank you for that. I think the first thing I would say is we will recirculate the key findings report from, believe it was September of last year, which goes significantly. It's a hefty report, but really it was the end result of a number of community conversations and data dives into the complexity of the situation that we face. One of those key findings was, for some members within this community, the absence of a dry shelter specifically was identified as a gap. We have heard time and time again about the challenge of both mental health and addictions. We do know that there is a toxic drug crisis alive and well in this community, and it's costing lives every single day. Our staff, our colleagues in public health, and those of our partners and those who are experiencing this every single day, constantly talk about the challenges that are related to both of those issues. I believe that what we have put forward based on the key findings report and the plan to end chronic homelessness, and then again here today, is rooted in data and is rooted in the experiences of what we're hearing both empirically and anecdotally. And there's no denying that continues to be a challenge to serve this population. So we'll resurface that, and then we can have a conversation separately, if you'd like, Councillor Craig, around diving into a couple of those things. Yeah, we're also not in the position to be able to address every single element of the key findings right away, and hence why this plan is going to take some time.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. It comes across to me that we're doing our very best within very limited resources with enormous problems on a number of fronts. And that's my concern. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Erb. This is a very ambitious plan, and in some ways it's a plan to make a plan. We've done the journeyman work. I think we all had sticker shock, and a lot of this will be subject to our budget deliberations. One of the questions that I've been asked, I posed a couple of them to Jay and Joe when they were delegating, but I've heard from other levels of government, is ROI, as well as how we know when we're going to get there. Can you talk a little bit about how we're liaising with other areas? Because there's also this concern about people coming from other parts of the province because we have a Cadillac model. And I know that there's been a lot of work done with other areas to share our expertise, and there's a lot of sharing of information and ideas, and I think it's really important that come out, that we continue to look province-wide at how we share the lessons learned in the formation of this plan to end chronic homelessness.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Chair Redmond. And yeah, the circumstances in the region of Waterloo are not unique across this province or this country. The scale and scope, the challenge varies. The response level varies as well. What I can reference is that something like Herbs Road, although innovative like 1 or 2 years ago, it's a model that has been picked up elsewhere quite quickly and implemented elsewhere in this province, almost identically based on our experience here in the region of Waterloo. Myself, my team, and other staff members are in contact regularly through various networks and associations with our colleagues across the province and across the country for sharing information. One of the anecdotes that I do hear that gets repeated is that people are drawn to Waterloo region for the level of service that exists here. That does happen, but not to the extent that may be out there in our community. By and large, the populations that we serve in our systems are either from the region of Waterloo or have very strong connections and ties to the region of Waterloo. That is the majority of people that we see in our system here. Was part of your question about return on investments as well, or did I mishear that?
Sorry, Ryan, repeat that.
Did you ask about ROI, return on investment?
If you want to speak to it, it was really what I posed to the delegates, because these are questions that senior levels of government representatives have asked me.
Yep. And so, yeah, I would welcome the chance to build on that to There's several recent studies that we've been referencing and have used to incorporate into the plan to end chronic homelessness that show that the investment, both in models like Herbs Road, but also in supportive housing, have a significant return on investment overall. Those savings come from the expensive services that Mr. Mancini mentioned through health system, justice, and elsewhere, in the form of every dollar that we're investing either in a model like Herbs Road or in supportive housing directly, comes with a return on that investment of $5 back from those larger systems. The trick is overall, those systems are not going to write us a check for the savings that are there. However, we know that overall, as a community, as a larger system, we're being more efficient and effective in putting the resources where we should in terms of the business case that also supports models of this type of investment.
Thank you very much. And you referenced in one of your answers 57 agencies and how we're collaborating within the region of Waterloo. It's also a real challenge when you go to the provincial and federal government to break down those silos of healthcare, community services, and the justice system, and all of those things need to be involved so that we can adequately address these situations. So thanks for all the work you're doing.
Still first round, Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair Erb. Thanks for the report. I just have a couple of questions. So one is on the Olive Community Leadership Table Lived Experience Working Group. I know there's a budget set aside. I just need to confirm that those, be it agencies or individuals who are participating, they are getting compensated for their time on this and participation. I know you may get a detailed one, but I just need to confirm.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. The other question I have is around the funding strategy, and in the report, that functional zero. And I know that the ambition is to get there. There is no communities within Canada or Ontario that have a functional zero. Is there?
Do you know, Ryan? There was... I'm drawing a blank. Was it Moose Jaw?
Moose Jaw.
There have been communities at times, particularly in Western Canada, that have hit a functional zero and elsewhere. I'm not aware of anybody that's currently there and has experienced a prolonged state of functional zero. So that's the goal for us in this community, and that's what the budgeting strategy has outlined as the roadmap to get us there, Councillor.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Okay, we're ready to start the second round of questions. I'm wondering if there's anybody that's prepared to move the recommendation in a second or to get
I'll
it on.
move it.
Moved by Councillor Hunick, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Okay, Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak on this once again. I want to commend staff for the comprehensive nature of this report, and especially the willingness to be vulnerable about the gaps that still exist within the system. I can't remember if this was the exact verbiage or if this is my impression of the report, but the idea is that we need to solve the immediate crisis facing homelessness right now through emergency shelters so that we can move on to solving the longer term issue of making sure that everybody has stable and permanent housing. I want to reiterate that the dichotomy between emergency housing and long-term housing is quite false, that it is the intention to do both. I don't know if staff want to elaborate, but...
Yeah, Councillor Hunick again. Yes, it's the intention to do both. I just want to just pick up on something that you said there and actually go back to my response to Councillor Salonen and then by extension to Councillor Schatz around the conversation that we often focus on in the emergency piece is the shelter and the expansion of our shelter system and the number of beds. That actually isn't our first approach. The largest single line item in our housing stability system is rent supplements, which is rooted in the evidence of Housing First, which states that the best Housing First models are those that involved a scattered site, supportive housing, and rent supplement environment. So yes, we have seen an expansion of our shelter beds because of the increase in the inflow, the exponential growth. At some point, those will come down. We will need some beds at some point in the future. Again, brief and non-recurring, hopefully. But really, it's not the only tool that we have at our disposal. And frankly, it's not even the biggest and the most effective tool that we're utilizing. It's really trying to get as many of those rent supplements out the door. That does, however, require a dance partner on the other side in terms of having something available and having the ability to contract with a landlord or another agency to help us in that again. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that it's not always just about the emergency shelter beds, although that's what we end up talking about quite a bit.
Councillor Deutschman?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was Medicine Hat that declared that they had achieved functional homelessness, and that lasted for 5 months. And then they were back to dealing with the problem again. That was back in around 2022. So as I look at this, I'm just trying to understand. I see the words funding strategy, and so when I went to that, I thought this is where we're going to identify where we're finding the money for this. So, so this $345 million, where is that coming from?
You want to go?
Well, we have
Why
a
don't
new
you start, Ryan?
It might be a good question for our new treasurer as well, but
Yeah.
we'll default.
Wayne, would you like to answer this question on behalf? No, I'm being facetious. I'll start. So the breakdown of that $345 million is in the report. It includes $177.5 million of estimated operating funding, the remainder $110 million of estimated capital, and then we've also allocated a provisional debt servicing. What we haven't assumed is the region is going to, as a funding entity, essentially pick up the tab for all of this, Councillor Deutschman. What we wanted to be able to do is answer the question, how much and where would you start? And what we need to do is come back through plan and budget and have a conversation with regional council through that process in terms of where this particular council as a collective wishes to continue to play an investment role in this work. And the gap, and we know there will be some gap, becomes the focal point of the engagement strategy. We changed the language a little bit since we were last year due to conversations internally and externally, and that's why it's not necessarily an advocacy piece as much as it's an engagement piece. And then to answer your specific question, the numbers themselves were derived from conversations with the co-creators and the partners that have put together the plan to end chronic homelessness. It is as comprehensive a list that we can come up with. It is as closely costed in today's dollars as we possibly could. It will shift. It's probably not non-exhaustive, but it came not just from our team, but really came from the community and the evidence that we know is driving us forward in terms of reaching the state of functional zero and staying there.
So just to clarify my question, it's not so much how did you come up with $345 million? I can see that it's well laid out in the report, and I thank you for that. My question is, where is the $345 million going to come from? Is it expected that the region itself is going to invest $345 million over 5 years? That's my question.
No, that's not the expectation. We will come forward in plan and budget, Councillor, with a recommendation on a 2025 investment for this council to consider. It will, newsflash, it will not be $345 million. We do know that, and we've said from the beginning, that this is an all of community challenge and an all of community opportunity, which will require investments from multiple orders of government, from the private sector, from the philanthropic sector, and whatever other sources we can identify. We do know that it was important to put a vector on the table in terms of what this would look like. Our view right now is that this is prioritized to answer the inevitable question of where would you start. But to be clear, no, we are not coming forward with a suggestion and a recommendation from a staff level that the entire investment required to end chronic homelessness should lie on the regional tax levy.
So just for clarity in the future, could that be part of a report in terms of where the potential funding would be, just so it's clarified?
Councillor Deutschman, I don't have the ability to say where that funding will come from. There are multiple sources of where that could come from, and it will require a considerable and a sustained effort to go and identify and engage with multiple stakeholders in this place. And there's different approaches to take to that. So I can't, and my staff can't, and I know our new CFO, Wayne, also can't sort of identify specifically where each order of government should come in and where the private sector and the philanthropic sector should come in. I believe that will be part of the outcome of plan and budget, and also a key feature of our engagement plan. So I'm not trying to be vague, Councillor. I don't want to let an expectation be left here that we have the answer as to the proportional responsibility of different organizations and levels of government to fund this.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, and thank you again to staff. I don't envy your job in pulling all these pieces together, but just to help me, and this might help me with the next report, not to convolute things for Chair Erb. Can you help me to read this graph? The relationship between chronic homelessness, investment, and housing outcomes. So if we look at 2024, the number is 208 and 515. What does that difference represent?
Councillor Shantz, I'm going to ask clerks to put this on the screen, and then I'm going to give Ryan a second to take the first stab at this one. Could you just repeat the question for us?
Yeah. So if you look at 2024,
Yep.
there's a number of 208
Yes.
on the forecast and housing outcomes, and 514 in the forecast and chronic homelessness. What does that difference represent? Not the number. I mean, what does?
Oh, sorry. Okay, so what's the gap for a
What's the 306? What is that?
So correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, just because my mic's hot. That is, in 2024, we were able to deliver 208 discrete housing outcomes. That is taking somebody from some level of homelessness into a housing outcome.
Okay.
The inflow of people entering into a state of homelessness in that same year was 514. So 306 becomes the number of human people, individuals, that are in a state of homelessness that we do not have a housing outcome for in that year.
So is that then the number who are in emergency shelters?
People in emergency shelters likely will be in that number, but I can't say exclusively that number is all in emergency shelter. They could be in any number of situations, but they are not in a regional identified housing outcome through our system. Ryan, how'd I do?
Perfect. So the 306 in the instance of 2024 would be the number of people that remain chronically homeless despite the work of housing 208 of them. That then carries over to next year. You'll see there's some additional inflow, but our housing outcomes increase and also helps to push that line down as we carry the projection and modeling forward.
So it's cumulative? That difference is cumulative year over year?
Mm-hmm. Yes, the modeling predicts that and shows that. So you'll see that line continue to come down and the housing outcome line to continue to come up to where they ultimately compress in 2030, hypothetically, to create that situation of functional zero that you've heard referenced. In that case, anybody that is entering a state of chronic homelessness, we're housing almost right away and keeping up with that level of inflow.
Okay. What I'm struggling with is the cumulative piece. So we're housing 1-for-1, but we've still got, if you start adding up 219 in 2018 and add up all those top numbers, that minus the bottom numbers would be the number of people who are still homeless. Maybe we can do this offline. I'm struggling with how we represent the need and what the need really and truly is.
So maybe an education session on the data might be helpful prior to plan and budget. We can certainly do that. There's a lot going on in this graph, which I would say is representative of the work. This is an environment, a space, a challenge that has multiple inputs. There are multiple things that are beyond our control as individuals and even as a system sometimes. What we're trying to show is that with further investment, we believe the modeling shows and the data shows and communities around the world that have succeeded in this space close the gap so that people don't fall into chronic homelessness. So again, remember, that's experience of homelessness that is 6 months or longer. There will always be people. We're going to grow to 1 million people. There will be people in this community who experience some level of homelessness. We capture all of them in the point in time count. The idea is to get to a place where when somebody falls in to that space for whatever reason, we have a system, individual response for those folks so that they don't stay homeless. And we're just trying to show that the only way to get there is further investment, first in the high level acuity piece, and then in the long-term supportive housing and permanent housing piece. Both of those things have to be true for us to have an impact here. Does that help? There's a lot going on in the graph.
I get that there's a lot going on, and I get that there needs to be further investment, and particularly in the wraparound services and helping people to move on with their lives. But I am trying to understand the magnitude of the problem, and I'm missing something. So maybe we can talk offline.
Yeah, the magnitude of the problem, if I can put it simply, would be we have more people falling into homelessness in this community than we can support, full stop. And if we don't do anything, that's going to double and potentially triple in the next 5 to 6 years.
I get that, but you will be asking us for a lot of money to make that happen, and so I just want to have it straight in my head.
Okay.
So thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Deutschman, is that a legacy hand or are you another question?
I'm being respectful of the 2 questions per opportunity, so I have some more questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Herb. First, I want to thank Councillor Schatz for those questions because it reminded me that we've got chronic homelessness, which is a subset of homelessness, so a smaller number of people. So while we're dealing with all of this, we still have the broader homelessness issue that will persist. And in terms of communities that have been successful, I still need to hear of a successful community. What I want to ask about today is, with respect to what it is we're going to be approving today. So in the motion, sort of 2 parts, it says to endorse and approve the prioritization of the plan to end chronic homelessness work. So we're prioritizing that to something, I'm not sure what. And then the second part is that we refer the operating budget expansion for 2025 to the regional strategic plan and budget process. And I just need clarity there. Is that what's outlined in Appendix A, which is a total of, I think it was $6.6 million. Is that the pages 2 and 3 in Appendix A? So the first part of the question is, what are we prioritizing this patch to? And then second, the referral to the regional budget, is that what's in Appendix A, the 6.6 million, or is it more than that?
I can take that. Thank you, Councillor, for your question. So the first part of the recommendation around the prioritization is we're seeking council's acknowledgement of what the community has said through the co-creators and other conversations of where this work needs to start, and knowing that there will likely not be a full suite of funding available to do everything right away. We wanted to be able to provide clarity and transparency on where we would start, where the community is suggesting we are starting. So we're asking council to take that information and endorse, acknowledge, support that prioritization so that we can continue to have open dialogue with our community partners and around this council, and going back and saying, you know, if we only have $1, where are we spending it? The prioritization has now been as complete as we can at this stage in the work. So that's the first question. The second question, yes, right now the expansion request that would come forward through plan and budget is sitting at that $6.67 million. Again, that might shift over the conversation of plan and budget one way or the other, but that's just our first number. It's a notional number that we will bring forward and then give some explanation through the plan and budget process, and intending not to do that today and circumvent or get around the plan and budget process. Does that answer your question?
And for future then, at budget then, for example, the last item there, the $2 million, it refers to the second hybrid shelter site. And so I'll just need some clarity about that $2 million as an example. So, okay, clarifying.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to get to the question. However, I do have one question, if I may, which I was going to ask before the meeting started and I forgot it. So in the report, we're talking about $57 million, I think it was, in servicing costs over the life, pardon? On capital, yeah. So is that 57 million assuming that the region, or how much are we assuming the region would put in for $57 million in servicing costs? Do we know that number?
So I'm going to answer them in reverse order. We are not assuming the region is funding the $110 million. We're not assuming they're not. What we wanted to make sure is that what we've identified through our capital, through our conversations with co-creators, is the plan to end chronic homelessness is dependent on some capital investments. We've done our best to estimate those at $110 million. And then we took and said, globally, if you were going to debt finance that amount of money, there should be some allocation somewhere for somebody somehow. There's a significant amount of debt servicing, whether that lands in one organization, one level of government, or spread across. It does not take into consideration the capacity for a nonprofit to fundraise for a portion of that or anything like that. It's really trying to show the upward limit of the best information we have available today.
Okay. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. Thank you through you, Chair. I just wanted, I guess maybe to wrap this part of the conversation up, it just occurred to me that when we recently had a discussion, there was, I think it's Jennifer Gordon was here talking about gender-based lenses on issues, on all issues, but certainly the homelessness issue. And, you know, as high as the numbers are and as challenging as the situation is, we also know that there's a lot of people not being captured in those numbers, particularly women. And so I'm just wondering, based on the presentation that Jennifer and Jen Gordon and some others did, what kind of thought you've given to the gender-based side of this, and the fact that there are more women who are homeless that aren't probably being captured in the numbers that we have, and how to tackle that through some of this daunting work that's happening.
Mr. Perrier.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. And yes, Jennifer's been an active participant at our co-creators table, so the voices of that particular group are very well represented. We know that they tend to be underrepresented in terms of data that we're able to collect from our typical sources. Part of the plan and part of the co-creators model is to make sure that we have these underrepresented voices spoken for to the best of our ability. The initiatives that have been put forward and prioritized have been done through that lens and with those groups in mind in particular. It's also been referenced the point in time count coming up in October and working with those groups specifically to try to get as representative of a count as we can later this month to better inform, to provide better data, to better model, and to better cost out solutions. So it's not a perfect science yet, but what I can say is that particular group, amongst others, is well represented at the co-creators table. And that's important for us in terms of how we've developed this process. It's more inclusive than we have been in the past. To my earlier remarks, it's not perfect yet, but it's growing and it continues to get better.
All right, we have a motion on the floor moved by Councillor Hunick, seconded by Councillor Wolf. If there are no other discussions, I would invite you to use your e-scribe buttons to indicate your support. And that is carried. Thank you, and thank you for staying in the lane. 8.1.3, Herbs Road Hybrid Emergency Shelter, the evaluation and recommendations. Mr. Sweeney, you're on again.
I'm going to pass it right over to Ryan. He can start, and I'll be his phone a friend as he needs me.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So the Herbs Road report, this is a report in front of you for recommendation. This report has been built on an evaluation completed at the 1-year mark of operation at the Herbs Road site. That evaluation was supported, as you heard through delegation earlier, through extensive interviews and surveys with past and current participants, staff, external partners, our operator, neighbors, residents, and businesses. Overall, the feedback through the evaluation and as demonstrated from the report shows a positive impact, particularly for the participants that have been provided a place for stability and a place for recovery and access to the supports that they need. We saw that 70% of the participants staying at the Herbs Road site indicated that they found the critical relief from homelessness that they needed, and 64% indicating a preference for staying at this particular site and model versus any of the other options that were available to them. For context and balance, the shelter has not been without its impacts on the surrounding neighbors. That includes the adjacent regional services, residential neighbors, and businesses that surround the community. Both the team in Housing and Community Services, as well as the Working Centre as our operator, we continue to work with all of those partners and community members to mitigate the issues that come up as they come up and be as responsive as we can in the moment that those incidents occur. Additionally, we also continue to support and operate a regular community and neighborhood engagement meeting for general feedback and engagement of all the neighboring groups. On balance, though, the challenges that exist with the site and based on the findings overall of the evaluation, the site continues to play an incredibly important and critical role for the people that are staying there and providing them a place to be other than remaining unsheltered across the region. With that level of input and that level of feedback from the participants, the recommendation in front of you for consideration today is that we continue at a level of permanency at this site for as long as it remains to be needed. In order to facilitate that, moving beyond a temporary status to one of permanency, we have some technical issues to address at the site, particularly when it comes to sanitary servicing connections. Right now, we're functioning as a temporary site, where a holding tank is permissible under that type of remit. In order to move to a longer term stay at the site, we need to address the sanitary connection. And so if the recommendation is supported to continue at this site, that's a project that we would begin to undertake. It comes with a cost that's outlined in the report. That cost would not have an incremental impact on the 2025 budget, nor would the ongoing operations if they were to continue at Herbs Road. I'll leave my opening comments there and happy to take any questions.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Ryan, for that. I think I'd just like to add a couple of points. The first is I want to acknowledge to this council and to the community that 2.5 odd years ago in this chamber, on behalf of the team, I specifically asked for the opportunity from this council to add another tool to our toolkit, a tool that we had been deployed in other communities in different settings under different circumstances, but would have been and was entirely new here in the region of Waterloo. We were not able to give you at that time any assurances that it would work. We acknowledged that we were basing this on what we were seeing in some other communities, but more importantly, what we were hearing in this community is that for many, many people, the existing shelter system was not working for them. And so here we are a year and a half later, and acknowledging that while we had originally intended this and proposed it as a temporary pilot project, it is one of those efforts that I would say, based on the experience, based on the data, and based on the human beings that have been impacted, it is one that we feel strongly should continue to be a part of our housing stability system while we work through the plan to end chronic homelessness. There are two data points in the report that I would like to point to, two that I'm most particularly encouraged by. The first is the 69% of people living at Herbs Road who said they felt safe. I have been in conversations with people who have experience with staying in encampments in this community, and I once said something about living in an encampment. And a gentleman looked at me and he said, "Peter, don't talk about living in an encampment." He goes, "We barely exist in an encampment." And so that stuck with me. And having conversations of people who try to exist in encampments, one of the most common things I have heard is how the level of safety is a daily, constant concern. People who talk about always feeling anxious and nervous and scared for their own personal safety, the personal safety of their loved ones, and the safety of their very few belongings. So to have almost 70% of people come into this new program and tell us that they feel safe here is an important metric. The other one I would point out to is 14%. 14% of people, so roughly 28 human beings, had never accessed our shelter before. Those are the voices of the people who have said to us as a system, "Your system does not work for me." This new tool in our toolkit, for some people, was the first time they were willing to say, "Okay, I will try that." The ability to bring folks inside, to bring people into a supportive environment, gives us the best chance to work with them, and are acknowledging our partners to work with folks to get them onto a path to permanent and supportive housing. So I just want to thank and acknowledge Council for providing us the opportunity to try something new, and here we are today asking you to consider the opportunity to continue on with this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunett.
Thank you, Chair Herb. I just want to underscore the importance of keeping the shelter open. I think the irony is that the 16 people around this table get to decide where 50 of the most vulnerable people get to continue living or not. And if we close it, we're undoing any of the good work that has occurred.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. Just wanted to, again, express that I think it was worth the risk, us taking the chance, maybe. I'm trying to remember what the book you read or the story you read, Peter, and how you ended it, but when you challenged us to take a chance on this. So I think it was well worth that taking that chance. And I would say, like broadly, when I've checked in with the ward councillors from the city of Waterloo, whose wards border or bound the managed encampment, they've had a few concerns, but we've kept in touch, and I think largely between the working center and regional staff, they appreciate the community meetings and things of that nature. Having said that, we still do have a few concerns. One of them is around some of the safety issues, particularly around when we initially said that we would open this, that there was a commitment to have lighting. We're concerned about the lighting that leads like on the roadway itself, and that there's no sidewalk on the south side. There is one on the north side of Herbs Road, but to get there, you have to cross a very busy roundabout. And so we're concerned about the safety of doing that, particularly when their lighting's not great. So we are asking if there's plans to make improvements on those two particular issues. And then, of course, some of the local businesses on Ira Needles have, expressed some concerns around some incidences that have happened. They're not attributing them all to the people who are living in the managed encampment, but some of them for sure have been, because there's been video evidence and that. So just would really ask that you continue to keep in touch with them and work with them and work with the people who are living in the encampment to kind of reduce that kind of activity to as great a degree as possible, because it is upsetting not only to the residents in the neighborhood, but certainly the businesses that operate not too far away as well. So the lighting and the sidewalk are two things I would like to know if there's going to be some improvements to that, because again, we're concerned about the safety of people in the area.
Brian?
Thanks, Councillor McCabe. And I know when we first started looking at the operating model here, those were concerns that we heard from the city. And I think given the temporary nature of what we opened on, the plans being a little farther out in terms of the lighting and adding a sidewalk, I think there's something we can go back to. Need to remind myself of where those might be in existing plans and what the cost is going to be. But should we be proceeding in a level of permanency at this site, we'll pick those conversations back up and better understand what's involved.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I strongly support this motion. I think this has been a very successful pilot project, and I'm glad to see that we're looking at this site as a permanent site. I know from talking to people who have lived there and people who are waiting to get in, much like the delegates told us, that sense of security, the sense of having a place where they can lock a door and have their own space is extremely important. And I know, even though there have been some problems perhaps in the neighborhood, for the people living there, it's become a home and a place where they feel safe. I only look forward to hopefully finding a site in Cambridge so that we can have a second site, because this is successful, and obviously we have many more people that need this kind of space to live. So again, I strongly support the motion.
Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair Erb. Thanks for the report, and to staff and to the partners for the work being done. I'm going to speak a little bit just to some of the concerns that I've received, more so about, and you mentioned this in the report, about kind of the visitors, some of the procedures and stuff that are in place there. And I'm conscious of, how we make this a community and redefine what housing looks like. So things like the no visitors, how we're addressing the hoarding that exists there, things that visually may disrupt a neighborhood, even though it shouldn't matter. That being said, I'm also conscious of the ways in which this model and what we have adapted here is being looked at elsewhere, and I think about Chatham-Kent, and I think about Sarnia and Peterborough and Hamilton and all of those areas that are now looking at adapting tiny homes, or in this case, those smaller module homes. So I think there is something here that is it's not perfect yet, but it's working. And again, in trusting a process, I will support this. I do know that there will be concerns, ongoing concerns, and we've got a lot of NIMBYs that regardless of where we look to support those who are experiencing chronic homelessness, there will never be a perfect spot. And I think that needs to be raised and confronted as well. So, but when I think about the broader impact that this is having, I think that there is something here that is working and that can be that can continue to progress. So I will support this, but I'm also very mindful of keeping close aware just on impact of communities around and how our managers, those who are managing this, are working with community as we go forward. So thank you.
Councillor Salmon.
Thank you. This report I find quite unsettling, that we're celebrating 18.4% of people moving into housing. What about the 84 other people that have gone through Erbs Road or currently live there? Why aren't we talking about that? And I know we kind of talked about it in large, broad strokes in our report before, but I don't know any other program at the region that would be recommended to continue its service level that has less than a 20% success rate and leaves the mass majority of the people accessing that service behind. I also struggle with the fact that back in the spring, I had asked my colleagues, and I get you guys turned it down, but I had asked for recommendations that included both the sewage updates, which we did get today, but also a wind down plan to ensure that regardless of whatever vote we know was ultimately coming, that we would have a plan for those individuals, as David spoke to them, that they do feel the uncertainty that council is holding the decision of what happens in their lives around this horseshoe. I'm really disappointed not to see that reflected. I appreciate that there is the staff recommendation and the professional recommendation to continue, but I think for council to make informed decisions, there should have also been information if council were not to support it, what a wind down would look like. I also have concerns. I most certainly hear and understand what you were saying, Commissioner Sweeney, over the sense of security, and I think that that's fantastic as a government that we are able to provide supports and programs that create security or a sense of security for people. However, I also have residents who have resided on Erbs Road prior to 1001 Erbs Road opening up that have security and safety issues now and don't have the tens of thousands of dollars that the WRPS suggests in upgrades to their rural properties. And we're talking about seniors who live on these properties in many cases. So absolutely, I do think we have a responsibility as human beings to be providing care to all individuals in our community, but how are we weighing those on who and how do we support people to find a sense of security when we're creating a problem that's making insecurity for others? Also from wearing my Wilmot Township hat, I really don't have great faith in the region proceeding as an effective landowner in Wilmot in terms of on this project. There have been permits that were not gotten through our township and completely disregarded the process that we as a municipality are supposed to have permits for certain things. Requests for foregoing inspections have happened on this site, which thank goodness my staff pushed and did not allow, but again, issues were found. Where are the guarantees for the Township of Wilmot, if this is to proceed, that the region and their contractors will conduct themselves in an appropriate manner towards the municipality that they need to get appropriate building approvals from? I'm really curious where that is. I was also pretty alarmed that this report doesn't at all reference the fact that the sewage treatment upgrades are not due to my township staff and their arbitrary decisions, but it is due to the Ontario Building Code. Nowhere did I notice reference to the Ontario Building Code other than saying that right now an exception is in place for the holding tanks, but it didn't reference that it is the Ontario Building Code that we're trying to get in line with as a municipality. So frustrated by that, and that my staff will potentially have to wear a decision that they are just simply enforcing provincial regulations. And then I also struggle with the fact that this is not actually a barrier-free shelter either. And I get that it is a tool in our toolbox, as has been referenced, but again, when it's one that we're trying to help and support those with the highest levels of complexity of residents that are experiencing homelessness, again, where is the barrier-free access? I can appreciate that your plan to end chronic homelessness, you are striving towards getting housing first, but I still think we can have barrier-free entry. And I don't understand why this site wouldn't reflect that if this is kind of our lowest bar site for entry into our system, which again, I've already discussed as a broken system. I really struggle with continuing to invest another essentially $3 million into this project when we could be investing that in more permanent solutions that is capturing more of these individuals versus the few exceptions that have been fortunate to make it out. And I see that my time is up, so I will end it there.
Thank you, Councillor. I took notes, so I'm going to try and do my best to hit all of your highlights, and please let me know if I miss any. The reference to the success rate, the 20%, 20-odd percent on to permanent housing solution is a number that is consistent with our other programs designed to move people through. And so from my perspective, something that we had never done before and up and running for only 18 months, achieving the same level of flow through as other modalities, I actually think is a success. When you talk about what about the other 80%, that is the crux of the challenge that we are working our way through. I do not have the specific data. Some people came to Urbs Road and made a decision that this was not the environment for them. My recollection is most of those folks were some of our earliest folks who joined Urbs Road, again, not knowing what to expect. There have been people who have moved on to other situations. I don't have the specific numbers there, but there are people who have continued to need the more longer term support and stability that comes with being there and providing folks, and again, I'll go back to the roughly 15% or 28 people who had never accessed a shelter before. We have people, and I know speaking to Joe at one point, folks who had come to Urbs Road who had been living outdoors for years. Folks with that level of chronic homelessness experience are going to take time to get stabilized before they can move on. In terms of a wind down plan, the wind down plan is, is not something that we considered putting into a report for your consideration. A wind down plan looks very much like it looked for 84 Frederick, where we wound down 66 beds to zero over the spring. That took 3 months. That came with a significant amount of work. And, we did our best there. It would include stopping intakes and finding other locations for people to go to, knowing full well that some would return back to living unsheltered by choice, and it would have a detrimental impact on their health and well-being. In terms of the security for neighbors and the surrounding area, I agree with you completely. The report that we put forward today transparently acknowledges that this has been far from perfect. Not only just for the people trying to figure out how to live there and the operators, but also the neighbors and businesses that are in proximity. Our commitment to continue to be a good neighbor remains. We are working on some issues on a sort of a case-by-case basis, and there's also been some challenges. We've had to make some structural adjustments. You've asked two specific questions that are outside of my professional expertise in terms of the approvals in the Ontario Building Code. I think I can speak on behalf of all of our of my colleagues and here at the region is we have. It is not in our intention to move any process through without having the requisite conversations and approvals in place. So I'm not exactly sure what else to say about that other than, you have our assurance as a member of this council and as a mayor of a township who's impacted by this, that we will continue to act with professionalism and do our best to balance all the needs of a number of people. Your comment around barrier free, this is a relatively low barrier program offering, but it does not come without some expectations from the people who are choosing to live there. And I use that word, like we're asking people, we're offering this as a location, as an opportunity. There are expectations, there are rules involved, and it is designed to support people through that. And we will continue to believe and operate models that acknowledge that different people need different things. We don't have a good measure of acuity in this sector that I'm familiar with. I mean, there are data points, but I can certainly say that the level of acuity from folks who have come into Urbs Road and continue to reside there is extremely high. And if I think about the return on investment that Chair Redmond talked about earlier broadly, there's also ROIs internally within our housing system. We have some program offering some tools in the tool belt, to continue the analogy, that have higher levels of investment, and I compare that to operating a hospital. An intensive care bed is much more of a daily rate than a ward bed, and that's based on the acuity and hopefully the short stay. So I believe we are providing a return on investment here. And then your final comment around investing in permanent solutions, I'll go back to my earlier comment to point out, and through plan and budget, we will really make an intentional effort to connect the significant investments that this council has and continues to make in the building and development of affordable housing, almost $500 million to ensure that there's a net new 2,500 affordable housing units, and the massive amounts of time, energy, and resources that we also invest in our existing stock of affordable housing, the stock of affordable housing run by nonprofits and co-ops, and the significant amount of work that goes into keeping people who are precariously housed in housing. And so there is absolutely a requisite, and I would say from a dollars and cents perspective, we are investing far more in the building of affordable and transitional and supportive housing than we are in providing acute services for those that really need it. If I had made all my notes, I think I hit the highlights, but I'm happy to have any follow-up questions, Councillor Salonen.
That was the general highlights. I think the remaining can be offline. Thank you.
Councillor Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's been a long afternoon, and certainly, the commentary we're hearing from different viewpoints, I think, is certainly vivid in terms of what's happening within our community. I come back to some of my colleagues in terms of supportive housing, and I think that's something we need to move on to as rapidly as possible. But I do want to point out something that if you go online and social media, which is probably the worst place to get information, and you see the videos of encampments, tents, and how some people are living, which is complete chaos and very obviously very vulnerable for people living there, you then appreciate to some extent what we have done in terms of Herb Street and what's happening there in terms of safety, the type of community they've tried to build, and the lack of obvious chaos everywhere. But I think my colleague also brings up the fact of community vulnerability, something I've raised in the past. We don't talk about that enough. I mean, we talk about vulnerable individuals. We don't talk about vulnerable communities that surround some of these shelters and places. And I think it's important that we spend more time, because there is a lot of distress in the community about theft about things being stolen, everything from copper wire to plaques to home items. And they're small items that the police don't always respond to and only alienates the community more. So I think we have to have a wider lens on the community at large and what the effects are. But certainly, I'm going to support the report. I appreciate the efforts of staff working in a universe that doesn't have all the answers and doesn't have all the resources, but demands that they come to a very high level, which is very difficult with the resources they have. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I am concerned about what Councillor Salonen was talking about in the scope that this is a step up. It's one step up for these people on a process. But part of that process is leadership by those running it. That when inspections are to be done, that it's responded to and that they are taken place, and that this is not forced on by the township. These are building codes. These are basic levels of living in our society. And if we don't make any group understand that, we already have failed. If we don't take that level to the next level, if we don't walk them along to say, these are the things you have to do. This has to be done. And I would be very disheartened if this kept on, and I would not support a program like this if it doesn't elevate. And I hope that when an inspection is called upon, that the doors are open so they can be inspected, and I hope that the proper process happens. And I can support something for like that, but I can't support ignoring what is basic for our system. Thank you.
Councillor Foxton, I think, and I'll look to Councillor Salonen and make sure I don't misspeak. I think Councillor Salonen is referring to some points in time relative to the development construction of this original site. This isn't about ongoing inspection. So to our colleagues at the Working Centre, this is a regional staff to municipal staff conversation. I think we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms that all sort of proper steps within those things are being adhered to, and that is our commitment. I just didn't want to leave the impression that there was something that our provider
Thank you for that
needed to do.
clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and that I would say is a correct interpretation. It was specific regarding to development of the site.
Yeah, from our original conversation, I think it was permit related. Yeah. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of things. One, I just wanted to point out that with respect to the numbers that have successfully moved on, we would be remiss if we didn't recall the answer to Councillor Leggett's question when they pointed out 40 to 50 are ready to move on, but we just don't have the spaces available for them to move on to. But I also want to point out that it's my understanding that while we may pass this today, I respectfully understand that, and I believe, if I'm incorrect, please correct me, but this is still subject to the municipality of Wilmot and the city of Waterloo agreeing to permit this structure to stay. And I just want to say that whatever they decide, I also respect their decision because they're elected by their particular people to make decisions on behalf of their community. And, you know, we're in a two-tier situation here, region, and I don't believe, I don't think we can just enforce this upon another area municipality. It's up to the area municipalities to decide what they want to do. Is that not correct?
Jennifer?
Yeah, so through the chair to Councillor Deutschman, in reference to the sanitary, I'm sorry? Oh, sorry. Is this better?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. I can't remember where I was at, so I'm going to start over again. So through the chair to Councillor Deutschman, in reference to the sanitary solution, the sanitary would be on region property, so it wouldn't be a part of the wastewater collection system for the Township of Wilmot. So that's where we get away from.
That's not my question though. I mean, whether this stays beyond 2 years is still subject to, because we're asking for an extension here from Wilmot in this report. Is that not correct?
So, yeah, so Councillor Deutschman, and I'll ask Commissioner Rose to clarify. What we're asking for the direction to have a conversation with our colleagues at the Township of Wilmot to extend the temporary holding tank for a period of months to allow us to tap into our own existing asset wastewater infrastructure. So that's the extension piece that would be required.
That's correct.
If that happens, then it becomes a fully owned regional asset on a regional piece of land with the proper infrastructure from the building code.
Okay, so this is wholly on regional land then, this encampment?
Correct.
Oh, it's the part that I was confused about because I thought it was still partially on Wilmot land and Waterloo land, but it's the holding tank issue that you're talking about that is currently there. Okay, thank you very much for clarity.
Councillor Leggett.
I'm really troubled by this whole conversation when we talk about what's successful. I think that's on how do we define successful? Is that on a scale of 1 to 10, and is it successful for creating place for 20% of the people? I still go back to that. I'm really troubled by that. And I think even if we had 10 of these, it would still be a fail. When we look at how many people that we have to house, in particular the high acuity with our house here currently, I don't know how we'll ever get to that point unless we put the money into permanent supportive housing. I'm not supportive of these hybrid emergency shelters. To consider them successful, I think we're kidding ourselves. And for other communities to emulate us, I think is disturbing as well, because as long as we continue to call it successful, then we're not being truthful with people. When there are security issues for people and businesses surrounding these areas, and there's security issues for people who actually live in these sites, because the gentleman that had left at the very beginning said that it wasn't a good place for him. He didn't feel secure. And I don't mean the one that was quoted earlier here either. This whole thing bothers me when we trade security of one or security of another when it's not even permanent. It just, and then I hear, like without the police department, without the courts supporting the problems that we have here and being effective partners in this, just to make sure that what happens surrounding these areas, unless that's all fixed, and I don't see that being fixed in the near future, we're going to continue to have these problems. So I can't support them.
Councillor McCabe, and then Chair Redmond, and then I'm going to try and bring this to a close and see if we can get a mover and a seconder on the. Councillor Nowak has to get home so he can hear the region of Waterloo delegation this evening.
You're reading my mind, Councillor Erb. I was prepared to move the motion.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Wolf.
I guess if I could just respond to my colleague, Councillor Leggett, and say, I think what you're underscoring is how complicated this whole issue is. And I don't think there's a silver bullet, and I hope that nobody watching this thinks that we think Erbs Road is a silver bullet. It is one more tool in the kit, and staff already outlined that it's yes and. It's this, and it's subsidized. It's wraparound services. It's supportive housing. So I just really want to underscore that this is merely one of many things that we need to do as a community, and I understand that the people with lived experience have been a huge component in trying to get this right for the plan to end chronic homelessness. But let's be clear, the BIAs, civil society, the rest of community also benefit when these needs are met, and they're not people that are necessarily hanging out in small groups in woods or in downtown. So we need to find a better way. This isn't a silver bullet, but I do believe that is a step in the right direction, and I will support it.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Any other questions, comments? If not, would you please use your e-scribe button to indicate your support? And that is carried. Thank you. Agenda item number 9, information correspondence, 9.1, council tracking information, which has been received for information purposes. Is there any other business? Our next meeting is November the 5th, November the 5th, 24. So we'll now have a mover to moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Solomon, to adjourn. Again, if you please use your e-scribe buttons to confirm your support. That is carried. Thank you.